Hello, everyone. It's Thursday where we have different shows of all kinds. I'm really excited for today. I'm meeting someone new today. Her name is Rachel Bennett. And the way we got to know each other a little bit is that we did a Me fair, which is metaphysical wellness fair, I think. And we were sitting there, and there's this astrology reader at the table across from us who's just getting all these readings. We don't really do readings at the fair. We're like beads and stuff. But anyway, kept getting readings. Everyone seemed happy when they left the table, and I was like, I gotta meet this person. So we brought on Rachel Bennett. So Rachel, what kind of astrology do you do?
So I do basic natal chart reading. That's probably my most common reading that I do. I do some predictive astrology as well. And then I've been getting quite a few requests for synastry readings as well as looking at composite and Davison. So when I do a couples chart or when I do a relationship chart, I kind of combine all of those and then go through some of the aspects that I see within a synastry, a Davison, and a composite.
Interesting. So what is your sun, moon, and rising?
So my sun, moon, and rising, I am a Libra sun, and I am a Sagittarius rising and moon. So all of my emotions come out.
Interesting. Libra suns, I would probably love relationship astrology. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. Obsessed with it. Love looking at the patterns, love looking at the connections, love looking on how we can make things work and, all of that. We're very positive. I think we're positive thinking around relationships. So,
well, especially a Sagittarius version of a Libra would be a very positive,
right.
like freedom loving, ha love and joy kind of astrologer. Um,
Yeah.
do you feel like your chart?
Um, Yeah, so I have a stellium in Sag. So I'm a lot of Sagittarius, but people don't usually see the Sagittarius, even though I'm a rising, until they get to know me and they're like, whoa, the free spirit, the knowledge seeking, the love to travel and new experiences and can't sit still. That's
Nice.
all there.
Are you a Neptune in Sag or a Uranus in Sag?
No, my Neptune's in Capricorn.
Okay, okay, so you're younger. Do you have any outer planets in Sag?
Uranus.
Uranus. Okay, so you're the Uranus and Sag generation. Okay. So I'm older than you. I'm the Neptune and Sag generation.
Fun.
We like
Yeah.
grandfathered you in or whatever. Um,
Well, thank you.
well, that's cool. That means you're holding it down for that Uranus and Sag generation with all those Sag planets. So you're like I've seen that generation be like the theta healers and the like basically get healed into being more free and alive kind of thing.
For sure. Yeah, we are freedom loving. Absolutely.
It's cool. Okay, so then where did you learn Astro?
So I took some online classes and I've had my chart read by Anne Orderly. And then I've also had my chart read by Molly McCord and done some courses through her as well. And then locally, Justin Elzy has taught me one on one. And then I've also worked at a metaphysical shop in Everett, Washington. I was a project manager there. And I learned quite a bit through the education. We held classes and workshops there. And to the point where the owner was asking me to start teaching the classes, and that's when I started to go into it. But I also read, any book that you put in front of me that's about astrology, I will read it.
Interesting. Have you ever read Linda Goodman Love Signs?
Love signs, yes, they have that. That's a frequent request, actually, at Vision Quest at the bookstore, that the metaphysical shop that I worked at.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah, that's a good one for relationship astrology. And it's also kind of good for just general astrology. So what is it? Okay, so a natal reading, every astrology does a natal reading differently. So like what is your style of a natal reading? Like what do you focus or hone in on?
So when I do a natal chart, I first of all I do Placidus. That's the chart style that I do, and then I look at what you just asked me: Sun, Moon, and Rising, and I get a feel for how knowledgeable people are with the signs in general, the houses, and then with so the signs, the houses, and then their personal planets is where I would begin. And I ask questions too, like if there's areas that, they're struggling with, whether it's career, love, financial, things like that. And we go according to the questions that they may have in their personal lives.
Interesting. Yeah, I always talk to my students about this because they're like, yeah, I got asked to read someone's chart and I'm just stuck. And I'm like, that'd be like if you took your car into the mechanic and they're like, read my car. Like it's just like oh, I mean, there's a million things you can do with the car. Like, are you checking the tires? Like, what are you actually doing with this thing? So,
What part?
Yeah. So I love what you're doing there because like that's kind of how I am is like inquiry first, like whatever you have a question about, and then I'll go into kind of teaching the chart of like sun, moon, and rising and planets and things like that.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, cool. Well, I know that everyone who left your table looked really happy, so you must be doing something right in the.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, well, so we're actually gonna hone in today on Chiron, which is funny because you didn't bring it up in your natal chart template. But um, I really am excited to have you talk to us about Chiron because we get asked about Chiron all the time at our school, and it's like I'm just not I'm so busy with the 10 planets and um
Mhm.
like that I never really get to Chiron. And there we did have one of our teachers, Debbie DeStefano, do some series on Chiron. And so I would love to add this to the playlist of Chiron videos because it's like we really don't have a lot there. So I'm
Awesome.
curious to hear about it. Okay, so you said you want to talk about Chiron aspects to let's start with Chiron aspects to the sun.
Yeah, so Chiron aspects to the sun. So that's going to influence whether so there's the trine and there's a square and there's an opposition. So that's going to influence how um, the Chiron reacts to how either you're perceived or part of your personality. It could be part of your life path as well. So a strong Chiron aspect, I would say like a trine is helpful. I've seen trines a lot of times with sun aspects with people who are utilizing the healing part of Chiron in their work or in like their personal lives and their relationships and things like that. Um, a lot of people actually in the medical field sometimes have that, or in like therapy, psychology often have that aspect as well. So yeah, it's supportive when it's a trine Chiron sun.
Hmm.
Um, and then with the oppositions, that's where it gets a little bit tricky because there's usually a resistance toward healing and doing inner work when I see Chiron oppositions to the sun. Um, so the people that do really just don't want to look at themselves or their behaviors and they don't really want to work on it, it's really uncomfortable for them. That's a pretty common thing that I see. And then with Chiron squares, it's really interesting. So Chiron squares, I often see people who kind of like coming up in their lives and they're forced to deal with it, that uncomfortable square aspect. And that goes along with, so that's usually like the individual. So when you have Venus aspecting, typically that shows up more in relationships, right? So
Wait, so
the
let's
same
can
kinds of
I
things.
ask about the sun real quick? So you're
Yeah.
kind of taking the general wounded healer archetype of Chiron and then applying it to these aspects. Is that kind of
Oh,
your take
it
on it?
froze.
Yeah, it kind of keeps freezing a little bit. Um, so are you taking the kind of wounded healer part of Chiron and just applying that to the kind of angles that you would get?
Oh, can you repeat that last part? Because you froze for a second.
So, so you're taking the wounded healer kind of part of the story of Chiron, and then you're saying like if someone's a trine to the sun, then they're a natural healer, and then if they have it opposed, there's a tension around being wounded and healing, and then this. So you're kind of the wounded healer camp of Chiron people.
I am more of the wounded healer camp. Yeah. I look at it as, I mean, we all have free will. So I look at it as an aspect that's very trigger, or like, I guess Chiron can be very triggering. It can touch and poke at those spots and on a very subconscious level sometimes that we're not really aware of. But if we're into astrology or we're receiving a reading and we see that something is transiting over Chiron or having some interaction with Chiron in our charts, then it's like, oh, okay, well, now I can be a little bit more self aware around what's going on with Chiron. But yeah, I would say I'm in that camp of the wounded healer. I feel very optimistic around choosing the choice to engage in something like shadow work to influence healing and help yourself, look at those things and then by, the typical description around Chiron, the wounded healer is yes, there's a wound, but by healing that, you can help heal others, or you can grow from that and everything. So I'm more, yeah, in that belief that that's what we should do with our Chiron. However, being in that and dealing with a lot of Chiron stuff myself as a human, I know how hard that is and how, especially with all my Sag stellium in my chart, how much I want to run away from that
Hmm,
when
interesting.
it comes up.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see where being such a healing chart yourself, where the story of Chiron and the healing oneself from wounds would be attractive to you, because it's like I think Chiron astrologers really help, they're healers, basically. They're helping people with anything that's wounded them, trauma, all that kind of stuff. So, do you think when someone has a sun conjunct Chiron, they are a natural healer? I mean, they're born to be a wound healer?
I think they have to deal with the energy of Chiron themselves a little bit more frequently, and it may show up on them, externally to others as well. But like I said, with the free will, we have free will, and we have that choice on whether to engage with the healing aspect of it or to resist it
Mm.
and let it, show out. So I mean, it could be somebody who has a little bit, depending on where that Chiron sits and their sun and everything, who knows? It could be somebody who wants to be a little bit more in a victim mindset for a while.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, because I guess I always think if it's conjunct your sun, I like what you're saying there because a conjunction is very frequently hit by transits. It's like in one transit cycle, a conjunction's hit 8 times.
Yeah.
By it goes like sextile, square, trine, opposite. It's just it gets hit
Right.
a lot. And I hear what you're saying there, and I think if somebody has to heal from trauma a lot, then they then later in life probably help people heal through trauma because they're so versed in it, basically. Um,
Mhm. I agree with you. I think that's the soul's plan, as I would call it. I think that's the intention of the higher self coming into this life. Having a conjunction like that would probably be to heal through a lot of trauma and therefore help heal others. However, like I said, we all have free will, so that can be tough sometimes.
nice, interesting. Well, before we go on to Venus, do you have specific methods that you like to heal Chiron wounds?
So shadow work is my go-to method with dealing with Chiron wounds, looking at shadow work. Also looking at like the house, obviously the sign in the house, that placement is pretty important as well, so that we can zone in on what area may be triggered kind of over and over and over again and get to like the core of it.
Interesting. So, forgive me for being kind of a noob to shadow work, but I've heard about it a lot. I mean, I just have never, no one's ever walked me through what is shadow work. So, like, what does shadow work look like?
So shadow work actually comes from Carl Jung, and he was the one who kind of described how to go through shadow work, just looking at the inner self. I think the way that he explains it, because he goes through a ton of archetypes, like the 12 archetypes, which often actually directly relates to the planet. So it's an interesting mix to really go down that rabbit hole and look at how shadow work can combine with astrology in general. But in with Chiron, doing shadow work to describe that is to look at the inner self that is subconscious and repressed, and look at the behaviors in your life that are not serving you well, and look at how to first of all, where did those behaviors come from? So going usually all the way back to childhood and doing some inner child work and focusing on like where did this pattern begin, and then healing it, and therapy and all of those journaling. There's so many ways of doing shadow work, but really working on addressing those behavioral issues or those thought patterns we get stuck in that are not serving us very well.
Interesting. So, do people do that in a journal or with a therapist, or what does that look like?
Yeah, both. I think they have shadow work journals, like all over Amazon has them. There's actually an astrology book that is geared towards shadow work. And so if somebody knows like their Venus, their sun, their rising, and where their Chiron is, the Chiron, it's about Chiron and shadow work. And it's actually, she has a very familiar last name to is your last name. Your last name is on my head right now. But it's Catherine Girds, and it's astrology and shadow work, I believe.
Interesting. Oh my God, I'm so interested to check out a shadow work journal.
Yeah.
Because we could be prescribing that to people under transits to their Chiron. If like Saturn goes over your Chiron for a year, it's like do the shadow work journal, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So they have prompts basically in the shadow work journals, and then you just answer those prompts, and sometimes they lead you to another question. So it just helps you dive deeper and deeper and deeper.
Oh my God, that is so cool. Well, because our crew at this school, we focus on remediation, which is providing remedies for every single thing. And it's like, I've never heard someone, I mean, I've heard people talk about Chiron, but I've never heard anyone talk about what to do when you're under the influence of a transitory Chiron. And this is actually groundbreaking. Like, I bet if you're watching this, let people know about this because like this is the coolest Chiron video ever for me in the part of like what to do and how to uncover your Chiron. I mean, if we had like, even if we had Jupiter going over our Chiron and we did the shadow work journal, we would kind of maybe uncover or our Chiron return. I don't know when that happens. Do you know when the Chiron return happens?
Believe it's every 40. I'm trying to think. It's it's late 40s, early 50s.
Okay, interesting. We have to pause to look at your tattoos. What are your tattoos on your hands?
Oh, look, I have, yeah, the hieroglyphs of the planets.
Oh my God, those are so cool. They're so beautiful. As an
Thank you.
astrologer, like just being able to read those is so awesome.
Right?
Do you
Thank you.
love those?
I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
I absolutely love them.
Wow, that is so cool. Um, okay, this is awesome. Okay, should we segue into Chiron Venus?
Yeah, absolutely. So Chiron Venus is the aspects to that and like where that sits, and how the Chiron sign and house interacts with your Venus sign and house. That's really important as well when it comes to relationships and how you handle finances. And
Hmm.
so, looking at that gives, especially when I'm doing like a synastry chart, or a composite or a Davison chart, looking at a relationship and looking at the Venuses and how they interact with each other and looking at the Chiron placements and how they interact with each other is all very interesting. I will tell you one personal thing. My current partner and I, we have such strong Chiron energy in our synastry that we are constantly doing shadow work and working through really deep things, and the transformation that we've gone through in a very very short, less than a year period of time has been astronomical. But we have my descendant conjunct his Chiron, and his Chiron conjunct my Venus.
Oh,
So
fascinating.
yeah, it's pretty intense.
Yeah, so that's cool. I never thought about doing shadow work with your partner. This is like totally blowing my mind because like I'm a journaler. You know what I mean? And what journal you're doing actually really changes your psyche, right? Because it's like
Oh,
what questions are you asking your own mind? And you know, it's like if you asking your own mind to uncover the shadow, that's actually that's really cool. Do you find that you dredge up stuff that wasn't there before? Like in shadow work, do you dredge up stuff?
oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah. So, and because there's so much subconscious going on with shadow work, that's why it's called shadow work, because it's something that we either don't want to acknowledge or we repress or we see it in another. That's very common. Have you heard like the analogy of like what triggers you in someone else is something that you probably should work on?
Yeah,
That's
totally.
a lot. That's a lot of shadow work. That's kind of like where shadow work begins, is like, oh my gosh, my coworker is gossiping all the time and I can't stand that she gossips all the time and this and that. And it's like, well, okay, let's wind that back a little bit, you know? And it's also, it's really interesting to look at yourself and see where you may have done the same thing, or look at something that is being done to you that hurts and then seeing where it had happened in the past.
Hmm.
That's like, it's blending that with a little bit of inner child work too.
Interesting. So you think if there's Venus Chiron connections that most of the wounds are going to be around love or beauty or I mean that would be the literal kind of thing.
The Venus Chiron connections, when they make a connection together in like in a chart, or you mean like in
Yeah,
a
like I guess like if somebody had like a natal Venus Chiron square, what would that look like?
um yeah, so I think that it's going to be issues around relationships and finances are going to give them that kind of, I would call, a pinch, and it's going to trigger them in some way, and then they're going to have to heal around finances. It can be beauty, it can be self-image and self-esteem as well, but it can come externally from a relationship itself, so they can feel that discomfort.
So why do you say finances?
Finances is, I think Venus rules over finances and how we handle finances and how we value money.
Oh, interesting. Well, I guess I can see that it's like a lot of people equate the second house with Taurus, and so like I can see where Venus energy would come financially. I mean, I know sometimes when people have a lot of transits of Venus, they end up like shopping a lot or buying beautiful clothes, and you know, like I could see where like Venus affects your finances. I never would have thought of Chiron Venus as affecting like financial wounds, but I'm going to think about that. That's cool. Especially now, what about Chiron in the second house? I mean, that would be an epic financial. I mean, we don't have it on our list to talk about Chiron in the houses, but I guess what do you do with Chiron in different houses?
I do look at the house that Chiron is placed in a chart and go over that house and how Chiron affects that chart. So, in the second house specifically, I would look at how that affects somebody and their self esteem. That would be primary, I think, and how it affects finances and their income, how possibly how they make money, and how they value money, whether they just, like you said, want to spend it frivolously and just all over the place, or if they want to hoard it and hold on to it. It can go both ways, but if it's imbalanced and it's unhealthy, it's important to look at, or where the trauma happened while they were a child. Like, were did you grow up really wealthy? Did you grow up with not really very much? What were your thought patterns when you were growing up around money? How did your parents treat money? What did you witness growing up? All of that kind of stuff is kind of uncovered with when we have a conversation around Chiron.
Interesting. Wow, you're really good at this. Let's see. I want to throw Chiron in another house for you just to hear how your mind works. Okay. So what would you do with Chiron in I'll give you an easy one. How about Chiron in the ninth? And maybe that's not easy.
Well, I mean, it's kind of easy. I've had Chiron in the ninth when I've been reading charts, and it's really, really interesting having Chiron in the ninth. It's oftentimes people have grown up in a very dogmatic religious based home. I see that quite frequently, or they are to the point of, just rejecting being put into a box of a belief system, or they can go completely the other way. I have someone very close to me who has Chiron in the ninth, and they literally go to two different church groups, and they are very religious, but also have incorporated some of the dogmatic stuff as well.
Hmm.
And so, and very strong beliefs politically and all of that. So
Hmm.
their belief system is almost like a little bit unbalanced, but there's work to be done there. And if there's work to be done there, I think that there's a lot of healing that can go involved. And because it's in the ninth house, they have the potential to teach others, and could be teaching others in a very spiritual way as well. That would be the higher aspect of Chiron being in the ninth house.
Wow, wow, you're really, really like profoundly helpful in your descriptions because it's like I see what you're doing there. It's like um, you're saying, okay, there's been struggle around this topic of this house throughout the life, in the childhood, in the early adult years, whatever the topic is. And then eventually through that struggle, the person starts to help others, at some point in their life with that house information. And oh, that's fascinating. Okay. All right. Any other houses you want to do?
I wanted to go back to the second house just because I've done a lot of houses that have had Chiron in the second house. And when I was mentioning self esteem, oftentimes I've seen that oddly, if it's an earth house, like an earth sign in that house, I've also seen it be very related to the body, interestingly enough. So self-esteem around the body, possibly a trauma with the body, something going on with the body can be in that second house. I would usually be like, that could be the first house because the first house represents the self, right? But when I've been reading charts, it shows up in the second house because it's affected their self-esteem
Hmm.
in some way. And Chiron can have the tendency to do that. In the first house, when I see Chiron, it's oftentimes around, depending on the sign, it can be around self assertion and doing it appropriately or inappropriately. Like how do we get to the level of you are asserting yourself in an appropriate manner? Or
Interesting.
you're doing it enough or whatever,
Hmm.
because there's people that can completely like, I don't want to be self assertive at all or assertive, or they just want to, or they want to be too assertive. It's like the complete opposite. But like I said, it depends on the sign as well that would be in there. But yeah,
Interesting.
I mean, we can talk about any house you throw out there. What's your Chiron
12,
in the 12th house? Oh,
opposite my Mercury. In
interesting.
Taurus. Yeah.
And you're doing a podcast, so that's all very interesting, and I love it.
Yeah.
Looks like you've done your Chiron work.
Well, I'm old, I'm 47, so I've done I
You
mean,
look amazing,
oh,
by the way.
thank you.
Yeah.
Well, so Chiron in Aries right now?
It is actually. I do want to bring that up because of the timing of recording this show. On June 1st, Chiron will be in an exact conjunction with Venus.
Oh, interesting.
So, a lot of triggers around relationships, whether this is the right relationship, wrong relationship, what can we work on in the relationship, and am I satisfied in the relationship? Now, Chiron being in Aries right now, it is a lot of looking at the self and satisfaction around love with it having Chiron conjunct Venus. So there's going to be a lot of internal thinking, thoughts, possibly triggers of like, am I satisfied? Is this right?
Hmm.
Um, Passion can be up high too, like passion, because it's an Aries and that impulsiveness that can be there as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people, if they're in like a talking stage or dating stage with somebody, that they just jump into a relationship during this
Hmm.
transit. Now, this transit is going to be really tight from like June 1st to like June 3rd. It's going to feel very, oh my goodness. So those are the days that I would watch out for
That's
that. But
that's really good intel. Do you know what degree it's conjunct? I don't have my ephemeris.
20, yeah, 25 degrees.
25 Aries Venus Chiron conjunction. Everyone watch out. Thank you, Rachel Bennett, for the heads up. Oh my God. Okay, so if you have anything at the 25th degree of any cardinal signs, if like anything,
Yes.
if it's hitting anything, watch for that. So, oh my God, this I'm learning so much because it's like I've asked so many people about Chiron, and it's like I don't know. I've never really like rocked. I mean, I've been busy. It's not that I don't understand. I'm not like a new. I'm not like a Luddite or anything like that. I really focus on the first 10 planets because it's whatever. It's what I do. But so okay, so let's talk about Chiron and the ascendant, which you also want to talk about.
Oh yeah, Chiron and the rising, yes, the ascendant. So when Chiron is on the ascendant, I've often seen that that person can be, they're not trying to be, but they can be triggering in other people's lives. So they can
Interesting.
be a trigger point. They can also, I think, through time become one of what we would call like the healers, because they probably learn throughout time, oh, there's something about me that shows up like this that may be triggering in these ways. Let me adjust and modify that, and then not, whatever that behavior is, and then they can work to help other people when they're feeling triggered or whatever that is.
Interesting. I can see where it's like somebody with it really close to the ascendant is causing wounds in other people. Is like a trigger is kind of like a when you kind of wound somebody accidentally, or
Yeah.
unless someone's trying to trigger, that
Right.
would be like a Chiron Mars conjunction rising. That would be kind of nuts.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That would be different though, completely. I think it's more subconscious and innocent and actually more undetected when Chiron is sitting on the ascendant, because it's so subtle. Chiron is an asteroid. It still has a lot of influence. But it's not like you said, like if Mars or Pluto was sitting on the ascendant, you feel that, you see that, that shows up a little bit more in the personality sometimes too.
Yeah, interesting. So I guess if we had Chiron square the ascendant, it would be either in the fourth or 10th house, probably.
Mhm.
Um, and if it was opposed to the ascendant, it would be in seventh. So we'd have to consider the houses of the Chiron there. And well, I mean, how would you mix like a Chiron in four with the ascendant square?
Okay. So Chiron in four is a very difficult placement that I've seen and actually know people close to me, because typically it happens in the home and it happens in childhood, a lot of trauma, sometimes abuse, things that they have to heal from when it comes to the home. Now, if it's squaring the ascendant, it may be something that has completely followed them through their lives, where it may be more detectable because
Hmm.
it's on their ascendant. So it's something that's kind of a little bit more obvious, like, oh, you may have had this trauma or rough childhood, or parents that abandoned or neglected you, or whatever it is that's revolving in the fourth house. Depends on the sign, obviously, too.
Wait, so do you think someone with Chiron conjunct the ascendant could be like a shaman or some kind of soul retrieval person?
Yeah, actually, I totally do, and I've seen that before. Chiron, it definitely influences healers. I also look at where Hygeia is, which is another asteroid. I kind of
Okay.
look at how they play with each other as well, if they have any kind of aspects together, because I definitely see that in healers as well. But Chiron, I have seen that in shamans and Reiki masters and people that do a lot of healing work.
Interesting. Have you read Asteroid Goddess?
I have not. Who is that by?
Demetra George. I've never read it either, but she's very well known in astrology, and I hate to use the word famous, but she's pretty famous. And she's now does a lot of Hellenistic astrology, but she did write this book, Asteroid Goddess, which is like the book on asteroids. So I didn't know if you learned your Chiron work from. I don't even know if Chiron's in that book. Have you read Barbara Hand Close's book on
No,
Chiron?
what's that
No.
one?
That's just called Chiron. What books have you read, or how did you learn about Chiron?
I have a whole bunch of books like in my background back there. There's one Chiron book that what is it? It's by the lady who wrote the only book that you need of astrology or whatever. It's that big long kind of like horizontal big what's her I forgot
The
her name.
only astrology book you'll ever need.
Yes, the only astrology book you'll ever need. I believe that she's the author of one of those of like a Chiron book that I had read, and I've read that one a few times, and it's one of my go-to books when I'm looking at because she basically just explains the houses and then the signs and how Chiron interacts with those. So she doesn't go over like any aspects or anything like that. But that was pretty fundamental in my learning and understanding of Chiron and understanding like the generation. So Chiron moves really slowly,
Mm,
so looking at like kind of the generations of where the Chiron sits within the different signs, that's kind of how I learned that as well. And I could see how Chiron interacted in the world when I looked at those generations too. Like, oh, well, obviously that generation would have a wound that, you know,
interesting.
that, yeah, effect.
Well, I wonder if people ever literally get a wound where their Chiron is like, and they have a wound vac. No, I don't know. That's probably not what we mean, but there are wound vacs where if you get like a really bad wound, they like vacuum it out and stuff. But that's probably way too literal. But okay, so that's interesting because I only really knew about Barbara Hand Close book and then also Zane Stein. That's another one. But yeah, okay, so there are more books out there.
Mhm.
Okay, so anything else about Sun, Venus, or rising?
Um, No, I mean, look, yeah, so it's basically just looking at the aspects like we would with any other planet and how it interacts with the sun, Venus, or rising, or moon. I guess it could interact with the moon as well.
Okay, let's do a few aspects just because this is good. I like watching your mental algorithm on these equations because you're so good at this. Okay, so what about Chiron Moon conjunction? Like, what would that person be like?
I think to say like they would be highly emotional when they are triggered, but they could by through like therapy and CBT and DBT and all that kind of stuff, like learning how to self-regulate, emotionally regulate, and all of those things they can learn how or they can teach other people, I would say. It again depends on the houses and it depends on the moon sign.
Yeah, totally. Okay. And so then what about Chiron Mercury?
Oh, I've seen that a lot. So Chiron Mercury, I've actually seen where they don't know how to speak their truth, or it's kind of like what we were talking about, speaking your truth when I was talking about it being in the first house to some degree, because there's sometimes I see it where they're just kind of angry. And so when they're in a triggered state or they're coming from a state of like their wound, they're speaking out, they're speaking out of that. And if it's a subconscious thing, they don't mean to, I don't think, but it's like I'm feeling hurt right now, so I'm going to express that hurt. So I see that, or I see that they just bottle it up completely. Like their throat is closed off. They don't know how to express their wounds or their pain.
Interesting, interesting. Well, this show's not about me, but I mean, as a personal example, I have a Mercury Chiron opposition square Mars, and I get in all kinds of trouble for saying stuff. That's why I have a bodyguard.
I
No,
love it. I
I'm
love it.
half joking, not joking. But no, it's like I got all this trouble for these like translation things in astrology, and like I'm just in more trouble than anyone I know for things I've said. But it's like, but I also like did a lot of healing for the community through those works. It's a long story, but like that
Sure.
actually super resonates. I rarely ever have anyone like read my chart because I'll be reading my own chart anyway. I've been watching my transits for 25 years. It's like. But okay, sorry, that was a little personal, everyone.
I
Um,
like that.
thanks for putting up with me, Rachel.
I like it. I like it.
Okay, so let's do Chiron Jupiter.
Hmm. Chiron, Jupiter, just like we were talking about, like the shamans with the certain Chiron placements, Chiron, Jupiter is actually a very frequent placement for someone who goes into healing work. Typically, it's spiritual healing work or it's like teaching, like a spiritual teacher to some degree, somebody who wants to teach about how to heal.
That
They
makes
gain
sense.
all of the knowledge and they have very expansive experiences around their chiron wounds and everything that's going on. And then they want to go teach how they got through it and how they healed. I've seen, what do you call the people who help you guide through like your mushroom trips and different like ayahuasca? I mean, it would be a shaman, but they have called themselves other things, but I've seen
They're
that.
like, oh, ayahuascaras or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then people who help you guide you through like a mushroom trip if you don't want to do it by yourself, or if you want to do it in a very intentional therapeutic way. I've
Wow.
seen I've seen that actually in two people's charts where they have Jupiter conjunct Chiron.
That's amazing. I can totally see that. Okay, so you're bringing me back to one other thing I've heard about Chiron, which is that it's kind of interdimensional or intergalactic. Like, so the kinds of wounds that often get healed with Chiron people are like of the spiritual nature. It's like they'll handle things that I guess that's where shadow work is very spiritual too, right? It's like dealing with the deep, deep parts of a human. It could be shadow work could go into past lives and like what happened. So do you kind of look at the intergalactic or interdimensional nature of Chiron, or just with the Uranus, or just with the Chiron Jupiter?
No, I mean, no, generally I try to if I'm going deep into a chart or if it's of someone that I'm closely around so I can also witness and view their behaviors. I'm also as a professional, I'm a drug and alcohol counselor, so I'm always curious to look at some of those things as well because Chiron does play a role in a lot of addictions because we can get caught up in the patterns. And so that can be something. But intergalactic wise, I mean, I haven't had the opportunity to really dive that deep and going down that rabbit hole unless it's been somebody that I'm very close to.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, but you're making me want to do something, so I like that. Thank you.
That's so cool that you do that for a job. I love recovery as far as like the 12 steps really help people get through transit sometimes, like
Yeah.
when they've got in the muck. So do you think that the 12 steps could be used to heal people through Chiron wounds?
I think so, absolutely. If they're willing and they're committed and they really want to work through it and get to and accelerate to that level of healing, I think the 12 steps would be very helpful and not just for substance addiction. I mean, it's not just for addiction. Anybody can benefit from the 12 steps.
Yeah, I know. I love the first step when they're like, I admitted I was powerless over X. I'm like, I just admitted I was powerless in general about everything.
Yeah, it's in general.
But it's interesting because a lot of ancient philosophers or astrologers were Stoics, and I'm reading this Stoic author. His name's Epictetus, and he talks a lot about things we can control and things we can't control. And he says like the power of a virtuous life is to not judge things you can't control, and then like do everything about the things you can control, which is like the Serenity Prayer, right? Like so
Yeah,
this. Serenity Prayer is actually literally ancient Stoicism brought forward, and
yeah,
sorry, that's a little bit of an aside, but I do think if we say I admitted I was powerless over anything, it could be like over what Rachel says on this podcast. I'm powerless actually. But what I can control is what I say back, you know what I mean? And like
yeah.
you know, but that's a real aside. But I do think if you are in Chiron issues, the 12 steps might be something to look at because they really heal people through a lot of traumas, I think.
Totally. And they go deep too. So that's doing some inner work right there, which is exactly what Chiron asks of us.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean the fourth step is like, healing resentments, and then we look at our character defects. And I think in order to heal the wounds that like either us wounding other people with our character defects or us wounding ourselves, which okay, this is making me want to ask you about sin, because like the idea of sin, well, like in sign language, the sign for sin is to hurt yourself. It's like to self wound. So like okay, this maybe might be too biblical, but like do we wound ourselves under Chiron, or is it, like is it, or is it just wounds that happen to us? You know what I mean?
Right. So most of the books that I have read around Chiron, it very much is described externally, as if it were something that happened to us. But it's really a psychological type of thing that it seems like we develop in childhood.
Interesting. So maybe we're like susceptible to certain wounds from the outside.
I think so. I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm thinking about like my Chiron is a really not fun one, especially for a Libra. I have Chiron in the seventh in Cancer. And for a Libra, that's not a very fun placement because that's so relational.
Interesting. Okay. So we would say maybe that you're susceptible to wounds in relationships.
Yes, definitely susceptible to wounds because it's in the seventh house. But with Cancer added to that, um, I have childhood and maternal wounds. And then I also have a kind of a difficult time with emotions, like deep, deep emotions and feeling vulnerable and actually expressing those in relationship.
Interesting. Maybe if Chiron was in the first house, there would be some self-wounding qualities, but or like
I agree.
or the 12th house, maybe where you like create some sorrow and self-undoing through wounding yourself. But if Chiron was in the seventh or the 11th, like it's definitely coming from the outside.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the 11th house, I commonly see somebody just feeling like the black sheep when they're in the 11th house, just feeling like no matter what they do, they don't feel accepted. They feel like they're the odd one out. And then oddly, later on in life, part of their healing journey, they become a leader of some kind. So,
Oh, interesting.
so yeah, sure. Of course, you feel like the odd man out because you were meant to be the leader.
Interesting. Okay, okay. So then sorry, you're so good at Chiron in the houses. So it's like, what is Chiron in 10 then?
Oh, that one. So in the beginning of life, yeah, you're kind of lost, or sometimes you're reprimanded for things that are completely unfair. And you're like, why does my boss hate me or whatever from authority? Or why did I get arrested for that? I stole a candy bar, like whatever the silly thing, like it seems trivial and it seems like from the outside, like you're just getting in trouble with authority sometimes, or you're getting pained by authority, or getting fired from jobs could be possible, or just not being able to find the right satisfactory fit for like a career, or feeling seen. There's a lot of that in the beginning of life, but then later on in life, Chiron in the 10th, those also can be people that tend to be healers or teachers, or using the pain of what they felt from that authority to help others. I've seen that actually because I'm a drug and alcohol counselor. I have done a few charts for some of the people, my coworkers, and I have some people that work in the jails. I have two
Oh,
coworkers that work in the jails, and they've had that. And I found that really interesting. I'm like, so how does that interact and how does that play with authority? And then what happened like in your life? Because typically they've gotten in trouble and they've created some compassion around people who've gotten in trouble, right? So then they're working in the jails to try to help people who have gotten in trouble because they have that level of compassion and empathy for them. And
hmm.
now they're using it in their career. So it all kind of just like goes together.
Interesting. It almost, in some ways, feels almost Saturnian because it's like I feel like your Saturn placement is where you're kind of susceptible to stress in a certain area. But then Barbara Ann Clow would say that Chiron, runs between Saturn and Uranus. So it's like where we go from that kind of being stuck in this, sensitive, like hurt place, and then where we become liberated by Uranus. So it's like I guess that is the Saturn
Yeah.
part's like the first half of life with Chiron and where we're sensitive to the wounds, and then the second half of life is like we liberate from that sensitivity and start just, you know,
Yeah, we find that freedom,
yeah,
the
interesting.
freedom from the chains of the pain that we've felt from kind of, I guess, Saturn, and the things not really Saturn, but we felt in earlier in our life with Chiron.
Yeah, interesting. Do you have a Chiron tattoo?
I don't.
Oh
I
my God.
I have room on my hands though, so
Yeah, you're gonna have to get one after this episode.
definitely.
Because
I love
you're gonna get known as the Chiron, one of the Chiron people.
Chiron. I love Chiron.
Um, okay, cool. So I think we've covered most of the stuff on our list except for Chiron and the signs. But one of the things is that you said that shadow work can accelerate the healing of Chiron. And so, what does that look like to accelerate the healing of Chiron?
Accelerating the healing of Chiron is typically like um, so it's what we described before, like with you could utilize the 12 steps. You can utilize a lot of different ways, but with shadow work, doing the inner work and like going really, 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 really deep to where you're actually healing it. You're not numbing it. You're not just like glazing over it. You're really getting to the root of it to be able to heal it. Then you can somehow, through that healing process, you're able to see that in other people. And you have that deep empathy and compassion for someone else that may have something similar. So then you go on to want to teach or help or serve or relate to or have empathy for someone who may have a very similar distress or wound that you've experienced.
It seems like, some people are easily triggered. Like, I feel like if you're getting easily triggered a lot, it would be good to do this shadow work to uncover why you're being triggered, how to accelerate the healing from those triggers so that you can then start helping people who are getting triggered. I mean, we definitely don't want to be getting triggered. I mean, it's a kind of paralyzing experience, right?
It very much is paralyzing, yeah. And depending on why you're getting triggered, it can be a lonely thing too, because, you're the only one sitting there feeling that trigger. And depending on what your response is to that trigger, that can do a lot of destruction and cause more pain in your life. Or if you do the appropriate things like shadow work or working on yourself and taking the time to go within, you can move beyond that and you can accelerate and heal. So that's where that free will comes in, and that Chiron can just be that trigger point to some degree.
Interesting. Gosh, I'm really learning something. Like I never knew about shadow work that much, so this is really cool. Okay, so you want to talk about Chiron and the signs? Do you want to talk about Chiron and Aries specifically, and then maybe Taurus, or did you want to talk about Chiron and all the signs?
Oh, you can throw out whatever you want to me. I
Okay,
can do a few signs, but I do
let's
know that it's in Aries right now.
let's do Chiron and Aries since it's happening, and like you said on June 1st, it's going to be conjunct Venus. So what does Chiron and Aries look like?
So Chiron and Aries can be extremely impulsive. It can be kind of the negative aspects of Aries that sometimes Aries can have, where it can be too fiery, too impulsive, too self-absorbed, things like that. Chiron can kind of show some of those traits, or it can go the complete opposite direction, still in a very self um, reflective way, where they're feeling like low self-esteem. Or, I mean, it can go all the way to the other end of narcissism, but narcissism, I think, also comes from low self esteem, too, though, in
Mm,
my personal opinion. It just shows up a little bit differently.
mhm,
But Chiron being there is an issue, an internal issue with the self,
mm.
typically.
So yeah, maybe looking at some of the shadow work of like self-referencing, like a lot of Aries are said to be like self-referential of like, and then I did this, and then I did this, and then I did it. It's like because I always think of it as like Aries lives in the muscles behind the eyes, and they're like, and then I saw this, and I saw that, and I experienced. It's like whatever they experience, they then have to talk about. But I think. So I see what you're saying there is like Chiron and Aries would be like wounds around self versus other, because I guess Libra is the opposite of Aries, of like when we are more other focused, that'd be like the opposite way to be, and then the Aries is more self-focused. So um okay, so then people should just then with the transit with Chiron being at 25 Aries, they should look at what it's hitting in their chart and kind of mix that delineation with whatever planet is hitting for them.
Yeah, so like you had mentioned earlier with the cardinal signs can obviously be affected because it will create a square, which could be uncomfortable for a Libra, Capricorn, or what am I missing? Libra, Capricorn, Aries.
Um,
Cancer.
Cancer.
Yeah, I had to think. It could be uncomfortable for them if they especially have 25-degree points or 25-degree suns or Venuses or risings or anything like that. Another thing I wanted to mention because it just came into my mind was that Chiron sometimes can in Aries can bring up inflammation in the body as well. So Chiron does have some um, I know we were talking about a lot of psychological stuff and wounding in on an emotional level, but it can have some issues or triggering around some healing, like if you think of healing, some bodily things. So inflammation can be something. The head with Aries, we know that too. It can trigger something like that with Chiron going through there. Rage and anger is also something that is heavily associated with Chiron being in Aries.
Mm,
Uh, Dealing with rage and anger and how to heal through that.
interesting. Interesting. Okay, yeah. So wounds around rage and anger, wounds around being narcy or not, wounds around self or othering, and then of course look at the house that Aries is on in your chart, and Rachel gave us all those amazing delineations of Chiron in the different houses, so that was awesome. Right, this is great. Okay, let's do Chiron and Taurus, and then let's talk about how people can get to know you and get to you, because I'm sure half of them who are watching want you to do a reading on their own chart about Chiron. No, I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
how much do you charge for a reading? What is your rate?
So I've been charging $111 for a reading, and it's usually 90 minutes long. Sometimes I
Okay.
go a little bit over. But
Wow.
I charge 111 because I'm obsessed with angel numbers. And so,
That's so crazy. I charge 114
how
because
funny.
my moon's at 14 degrees Pisces, and that's why I do 14.
I love that. I love
That's
that.
that's crazy. I love 111. People are always like, you should charge 175. I'm like, do you really think I want my words weighted at that level? It's like I'm just a person. You know what I mean? Like, okay, so 111, that's really cool. I love that. And so do you work on Zoom or do you work
Yeah, I work on Zoom when I do my readings long distance. I have met in person, but I mostly work on Zoom.
interesting. Okay, so let's talk about Uranus in or sorry, Chiron in Taurus because it'll be going into Taurus. What do you think of that?
So Chiron, when it's in Taurus, when I think of Taurus, I think of possessions, right? So Chiron being in Taurus, I would think that where they can have, I think we mentioned the second house earlier, where it can be an imbalance of holding on to and hoarding and wanting to keep things in their own possession, or that feeling of just it's that scarcity feeling of just not having enough.
Hmm.
you know I see that pretty commonly, but it also, like, I've with some of the readings I've seen, especially with an earth sign in the second house or something like that, with the body being afflicted in some way around self-esteem. I have seen that. I'm trying to think. So Chiron and Taurus, I've seen as far as how it presents, people can be extremely stubborn. That seems to be a common theme, or that scarcity mindset, thinking of not having enough. um, or I've seen them be overly superficial. But again, that comes from that self-esteem part. They're only superficial, I think, because they're wanting the admiration or the validation from other people. And
Hmm.
so they eventually seem to find out later on in life is that it comes through self-acceptance, and you can't you can't just live your whole entire life seeking to be validated or having all of these material things. That's not going to be fulfilling,
Hmm.
you know. I've also seen it in work as well. So they can't keep like stable work for
Hmm.
some reason. I don't know why that one hits in the second house or with Taurus, but it tends to.
Interesting. So it's like we would be looking at all like wounding around all Taurus traits. I feel like hold on a sec. I have my planets, I mean my signs, like just I have a worksheet and
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if like we could do keywords. Oh, it's not in here. We could do keywords of like wounding in, oh, I think I found it. Okay, so let's look at keywords about like wounding in Taurus. Like,
Oh
so
yeah.
wounding around trust, because like Tauruses are said to be trustworthy, steadfast, persevering, persistent, but weaknesses would be stubborn, obstructive, lazy, or boring. Wounds about being boring. No, I don't know. But I mean, all the good strengths of Taurus are like persistent, composed, sympathetic, consistent, calm, patient, right? But like
Right.
we would be looking at wounds around being too fixed, right? And being kind of
Exactly.
like I like you're saying about possessions is because it's like I'm so fixated on my stuff that or my money or my self-worth or all these things that I am kind of okay, so I see what you're saying there.
Yeah, so you could to do like one prompt in shadow work if you had that, if you had Chiron in the second house, is you could ask yourself, in what areas can I be more flexible? Or in what areas can I loosen the reins just a little bit? And then practice that behaviorally. So
Beautiful.
that's just one small prompt.
Beautiful. Okay. So with our last 2 minutes, thank you for all that. You probably felt like you were working really hard. Um, but I really appreciate you doing this because it's like I didn't even get to know you at all at the conference, and it was like this is how you have to actually talk to people to get to know them. I don't know what that is. Um, but okay, so now that we know you a little bit, tell us how we can get in contact with you.
Yeah, so I have an Instagram. I have a business that I run, and that's actually where you can find me at the MeWe fairs and the metaphysical market, and I do um, the alchemy fair, a lot of different fairs and conventions and things like that I go to. But my business is called Love and Above, and I'm a Reiki master teacher. So I bring my that work there, and I also do astrology and tarot readings as well. So my Instagram is Rachel. I'm looking at it right now here. So Rachel underscore love underscore and underscore above. I know that's a long one,
Hmm.
but you can find me on Instagram or you can email me, and it's a long one too. It's love dot and dot above dot 4444 at gmail.com.
All right. Well, wonderful. You know, if you could email me those contact info, I'll put it in the actual link to the video, and that would be awesome. Thank you
Cool.
so much, Rachel.
Thank you.
You're always welcome at the Moira Press, and we will see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye.